He looks weird.
Oral questions. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
I just choked on water. Oral questions. Guess who's that? Honourable Leader of the Conservative for today, Andrew Scheer.
To this NDP Liberal government, it's clear the Prime Minister is not worth the cost of
that was
housing.
weak.
He created housing hell by doubling rents, mortgage payments, and the needed down payment.
I get an L for that.
As housing prices skyrocket, the greedy federal government rakes in the cash. The Prime Minister now collects more in taxes on the sale of a new home than
That's embarrassing.
the carpenter or electrician that actually builds the house. The solution? Our common sense plan to axe the federal
coffee
sales
went down
tax
the wrong
on new
pipe.
homes. On an $800,000 home, this will save a home buyer $40,000. So why not provide some much needed relief and axe the tax off of new homes?
In 24 hours, I'll have another chance.
Housing, infrastructure, and communities.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see the Conservatives have taken some inspiration from our plan in removing the GST to help get more homes built. But what's completely unacceptable is how they say they're going to pay for it. And this is telling about their strategy across a range of policy areas. They want to cut the programs that are going to deliver housing for low-income and middle-class families today, just like they plan to cut the programs that are going to provide dental care for families who need it, like they plan to cut the programs that will deliver birth control to Canadian women for free, like the way that they oppose programs to support seniors with pensions, students with student loans, and families with the cost of raising kids. It's time to build, not cut.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, actually, the Liberals' own housing advisor said that the Liberal plan is, quote, turning out to be nothing more than a heist of tax dollars flowing from the feds to municipalities. They fund bureaucracy and photo ops, not build new homes. It used to be in this country that it took 25 years for the average family to pay off their house. Now it takes 25 years just to save up for the down payment.
Yeah.
Our plan on an $800,000 home will save a new home buyer $2,200 a year in mortgage payments. $800,000 used to buy you a mansion. Now you're lucky if you get 4 walls and a roof in Toronto and Vancouver. So why not adopt our plan and axe the tax off of new homes?
That's true, man. You can't even buy a bus stop for that amount of money.
Mr. Speaker, when he says adopt their plan to cut the supports for cities who are going to build home, so plans to cut the money that's actually going to build the infrastructure to make home building possible. He talks about bureaucracy. He must not have read the line in his own plan that says that they want to hire new bureaucrats just to run a snitch line if you don't like your neighbor's housing policies. They came up with this stuff on the backside of a napkin after Googling housing for 5 minutes. When you actually talk to the people who have experience building homes, they will tell you how to get it done. We're going to follow the advice of the people who are building homes and talk to the people who have lived experience with housing needs.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
This from the minister who admitted at committee that his housing plan doesn't actually build homes. Their plan funds bureaucracy and photo ops. And the more the Liberals spend, the less they build and the more Canadians have to pay. Since this Prime Minister started giving hundreds of millions of dollars to city politicians, housing starts are down. They're down 10% in Ottawa, 15% in Winnipeg, and down 20% in Vancouver and Toronto. So why won't the government adopt our common sense plan to build the homes by axing the tax?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, a point of clarification. Housing starts this year are actually up year over year, but up tens of thousands over the last time the Conservatives were in office, when their current leader actually had responsibility for the agency that manages housing in this country. But, Mr. Speaker, to drive home the point that is most essential here, when they came up with a new idea on housing, they said they are going to pay for it by cutting programs that build middle-class and low-income housing for families right across this country. They want to cut housing, they want to cut health care, they want to cut supports to families, and that is completely unacceptable.
Want to cut Liberal jobs, too.
From Foothills.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals just aren't worth the cost. Today, Hunger Count revealed more than 2 million Canadians went to a food bank in March, up 6% from the previous year, and food bank use has doubled since 2019, and a third of those relying on food banks are children, meaning millions of Canadian families can't feed their kids. The NDP Liberals increased the carbon tax 23%, leading to record-breaking food bank use. They're not done. They want to quadruple that tax. Will the Prime Minister end the suffering he has caused and call a carbon tax election?
We're going to find out tomorrow with the Bloc.
Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that we've been living through expensive times, and that's exactly why we've made investments in Canadians and their families. Investments like the Canada Child Benefit, Mr. Speaker, introducing the Canada Disability Benefit, increased investments in housing, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has continued to oppose us at each and every step, and now has announced his plans to cut even further. We will fight for Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
We recognize you're drowning. Hey, can you hold this brick?
Glad at least one Liberal minister understands Canadians are living in expensive times that their policies caused. But let me help her with her answer. Food insecurity in Canada is up 111%. 2 million Canadians went to a food bank in a single month. Food inflation is a staggering 37% higher in Canada than it is in the United States. The Parliamentary Budget Officer already confirmed what Canadians know: the carbon tax is all pain, no gain. Will the Prime Minister stop his tax tricks and give Canadians the treat of a carbon tax election this Halloween?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr.
Speaker.
We have known for a very long time that the Conservatives are crying crocodile tears when it comes to the most vulnerable in Canada. And today, the Conservative leader actually admitted it. He said, and I quote, "We're going to cut 2 programs for sure and more beyond that." So now we know. They're going to cut childcare. They're going to cut the Canada Child Benefit. They're going to cut dental care. They're going to cut pharmacare. They're going to cut support for seniors. That is unacceptable. We won't let them do that.
Although the chair couldn't hear, there was some back and forth. I'm going to ask honourable members please not to take the floor unless recognized. The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of the Liberal NDP government, they're not worth the cost or hunger. Food Banks Canada came out with a report that more than 2 million Canadians visited a food bank in March, a 6% increase from last year. 1 in 5 of those food bank users are workers, 70% are renters, and as Canadians' incomes decline, this government doubled housing costs and rent. Canadians' incomes are lower than they've ever been. And starving Canadians further that this woke NDP Prime Minister will quadruple their carbon tax scam. Why not just call a carbon tax election now and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that everywhere in the world, the costs of living have been incredibly difficult to deal with. And the Conservative solution to cut the things that provide vulnerable people support will put them in a much worse position. And let me put it into clarity. The earlier question referenced the United States. Do you know in the United States that the life expectancy is 5 years lower? Did you know in the United States that the average citizen has 6 more years in illness and disease? That's what their cuts would bring. That's the truth of what they're offering, and that's why we oppose their agenda.
The honourable member from Calgary Forest.
Mary Ng is on the floor.
That brought scurvy back to Canada. And they don't want to talk about the 2 million Canadians that they sent into a food bank in a single month, a third of which are children. They don't want to talk about going down the path of their radical plan to quadruple the carbon tax when they know 1 in 4 Canadians are already skipping meals and 1 in 5 food bank users are workers. They also don't want to talk about the fact that their plan was to always double housing costs. Why don't they just do everyone a favor? Why don't these economic arsonists stop gaslighting Canadians and call a carbon tax election now?
Mary Ng is on the floor right there.
The honourable member, the honourable minister.
How is it illegal?
What else is back? Tuberculosis, measles, syphilis. Why does this happen? It's because the slogan machines on the other side, diving deep into the threads on Reddit, are creating and spreading information that confuses the health landscape and means that things that we had long put behind us come back. We cannot afford the kind of misinformation and the kind of nonsense that they spin. Not only because it is not true, but because it put lives at risk, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Peterborough-Kawartha.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Today, Food Banks Canada released their 2024 hunger count, and the stats are heartbreaking and record-breaking. Over 2 million Canadians used a food bank in 1 month. 700,000 of those users in 1 month in Canada were children. And what's this Prime Minister's response? Well, he's going to drive up the cost of food even more by quadrupling the carbon tax. Canadians can't afford him. His caucus doesn't want him. So why doesn't he let Canadians decide what they want and call a carbon tax election?
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when Canadians are facing tough times, what should a government do? They should provide programs that provide...
They should resign.
Like the Canada Child Benefit, like making childcare more affordable,
That's
like
right.
dental care for seniors and vulnerable Canadians.
right.
But what is the Conservative plan? Well, it's to cut those programs.
That's
it's to
right.
take away the
They
very
admitted it
supports
today.
that Canadians
Freeland, shut up.
when times are tough. Mr. Speaker, we know the Conservative plan, and it's to balance the books on the backs of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we won't stand for that. We're going to stand for Canadians. Thank you.
Very good.
The Honourable Member from Peterborough Kawartha.
That's funny.
Speaker, Canadians will not stand for that gaslighting. After 5 years, in the last 5 years, food bank usage has doubled. It is the highest in history. People who used to volunteer at the food bank are now lining up to use it. Food banks are running out of food in Canada. Mr. Speaker, please, for the love of God, let them call a carbon tax election. This Prime Minister doesn't seem to understand the human consequences of his policies, that when you tax the farmer who grows the food, the trucker who ships the food, you end up taxing the Canadian who has to buy the food into poverty. Call a carbon tax.
There you go.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
$7,782 a year tax-free. That's the Canada Child Benefit that has helped lift over 450,000 children out of poverty.
That's
what
right.
that member is calling gaslighting is real money that's helping real Canadians. Who's doing the gaslighting, Mr. Speaker? It's the Conservative members of Parliament that want to sell slogans instead of solutions. It's them who say that they can fix things while cutting the services and the programs that Canadians rely on. We're going to do real things that help real people. That's what we do on this side of the House.
Beautiful.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years, the Liberal bloc isn't worth the cost of housing. The Liberal bloc has doubled the cost of rent, mortgage payments, and down payments. The federal sales tax adds $50,000 to the cost of houses that cost $1 million. Common sense Conservatives will axe the federal sales tax on new homes for an $800,000 home. That means buyers will save $40,000. That's $2,200 per year in mortgage payments. The Liberals
Can't believe I
by
choked
the
on my
bloc,
coffee
will
at that
they
intro.
axe the GST on housing, or will they continue to fund programs that only deliver photo ops? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, during a rare press conference, the Conservative leader gave an honest answer about his plan to make cuts. He said, we are going to cut programs, two for sure, and others that are underway. Under the Conservatives, Canadians will have fewer homes built more slowly. They'll have more costly visits to the dentist, later retirements, and families will have fewer supports. These cuts are completely unacceptable. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' housing advisor said this morning that the Liberals' photo ops plan, the plan to accelerate home building, is useless and inefficient. You know, we've always assumed in Quebec that young people would be able to dream of having a home, but unfortunately, after 9 years of the Liberal bloc, the boss of Desjardins has confirmed that young people are going to have to wait 10-15 years longer than their parents before becoming homeowners. They won't be young anymore by the time they can afford a house. We need to get going. A generation is waiting. When will the Liberal bloc accept our common sense proposal to axe the GST on new homes? The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Economic Development. Once again, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party is giving a clear example of how, for everything they want to put in place, they're going to make a cut somewhere else. So healthcare, social programs, and now today they're saying that they're going to cut the housing accelerator. Mr. Speaker, how can this member who comes from Quebec tell the government of Quebec that he wants to cut 8,000 affordable social homes in Quebec? Because that's what he's just told Quebecers today, Mr. Speaker. I would invite honourable members, if they wish to ask questions, to please put
Ferme la bouche, Greg.
So, and the Speaker will be very happy to recognize them. The honourable member for La Prairie. Everyone in Quebec is worried about our ability to welcome so many asylum seekers. But the number of asylum requests might go up because there are elections coming up in the United States in 8 days, and Trump has promised, as he said yesterday in New York, that as of day one, he'll launch the biggest program of deportation in the history of the country. He said he would deport up to 18 million people. Many Americans are very worried about this, but it should also worry the federal government.
Yeah, they're going to come here.
The government have a plan if migration from the United States suddenly becomes a flood.
Oh, that's going to be insane.
Of immigration. Yes. The honourable member.
Care to share?
If
wow.
people are afraid of being deported by Trump, they must leave the United States. They could be many to consider going north instead of south. And remember, the last time that Trump promised deportations, it started off what we saw at Roxham Road, and we're still living with the consequences of that 7 years later. Governing means planning. It's not just saying yes. So without assuming what the results of the election will be, can the government please reassure us that there's a plan in case there's a massive increase in the number of asylum seekers, and not just say yes?
Man, it's something I don't think about, but it's definitely something to worry about.
Well, once again, Mr. Speaker, yes, we have a plan. The reality is that we've always managed the border with the United States, and it'll continue to be that way after the upcoming election.
Roxham Road, bro. What do you mean?
Member from Vancouver East.
Abortion care is under threat in Canada. Women don't want more liberal talking points. They want protection. Women and gender diverse people are seeing hateful anti-choice rhetoric creep into Parliament, spread by the Conservatives under their leaders' watch. That's right. Clinic 554 closed in New Brunswick, and abortion care across Canada has been chipped away at. So while the Liberals' words are nice, their lack of action is dangerous. Yeah. Will the Liberals stop their grandstanding and start making sure every person in Canada has equal access to abortion care?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yes, Mr.
Here comes the mansplaining.
That's exactly what we're doing and working with provinces and territories to make sure that the investments that we have in sexual health are there to make sure that women have access to an abortion. That's why we're advancing the work we're doing on pharmacare to make sure that women have both the contraception and access that they need. But on the point, and this is an extremely important point, when the Conservatives have such a huge number of people in their caucus who are anti-choice, who are standing up against women's rights, we have to call that out. A woman has full autonomy and right over her body. There is no member of this legislature or anybody who should claim to have authority over a woman's body.
The Honourable Member from North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, it's very hard to implement a right when the Liberals don't assure access. Women are scared. They're seeing Conservatives attack their right to choose. Meanwhile, the Liberals have a
We're all thinking it, nobody say it.
to chip away at abortion care, making it nearly inaccessible in some provinces. When women and gender diverse Canadians are sick of hearing these pretty words from the Liberals, and they sure don't want their health care in the hands of the Conservatives. They want their right to choose to be protected. Will the Liberals support the NDP in making sure abortion care is fully accessible for all?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Puts women's right to abortion care at risk, Mr. Speaker. A Conservative caucus over there with a third of their members having been greenlit by anti-choice organizations across this country, members across the aisle who have voted consistently for backdoor anti-abortion legislation, and a leader that will not stand up for the rights of women in this country. That's what's putting the risks of women's health at great jeopardy in this country, and we're not going to stand for it, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, Mark Miller looks weird.